So fantasy-wise, I would imagine K-Rod's value goes down, but whose value goes up? Who gets a chance to close in New York? Is it Parnell or Isringhausen?
Well, in terms of his value, again, as a person who owns K-Rod in the Rotowire staff league, I'm not happy, obviously, with this trade. I'm kind of hoping it came 2 days later because we get to put in our free agents this week on Thursday. And one of the guys I was targeting just in general as a hedge for down the road was Parnell. So in terms of Milwaukee's, yeah, as you mentioned, he's probably going to set up. I mean, Saito's been hurt this year. Cameron Lowe and Hawkins haven't done bad jobs. But again, that gives him a hedge if something happens to Axford, who's been phenomenal ever since the opening day blow-up. On the Mets side, Isringhausen is 7 saves away from 300. There may be an opportunity where the Mets try to get him closer to that number. And again, remember that Izzy as well as Tim Burdack are two other guys that are on the block this year. The Mets are looking to move because they only have one-year deals, and there is a lack of relief, good, solid relief pitching in the marketplace. In terms of longer term for the remainder of this year, as opposed to what they did last year by letting Hisanori Takahashi close and not turning to Parnell, I would guess Parnell, especially since K-Rod seemed to anoint him as his closer of the future. A lot of the comments after the game a couple weeks ago where he hit 100 miles an hour and had those 2 perfect innings, K-Rod was pumping him up that he should be the guy for the future. He's done a much better job of controlling the fastball, having a good, solid control and movement on the slider, especially late-breaking movement on that slider. So if you're looking for a guy for the remainder of this year in terms of pecking order, I would say that Parnell is the main guy for the remainder of this year. I can see Izzy getting some chances in the short term, potentially as they try to get him to 300 if they don't deal him by the trading deadline.
Let me go back to Beltran, who you brought up. So what you told us before is that if they trade Beltran, that really is the white flag. Then they are selling, right?
Correct.
Okay. So as far as Beltran's fantasy implication for the second half, again, I'm curious your insight into them as a team there. He's had a great year. He's been healthy again. When he is, he's one of those 5'2" guys who's always been a talented guy in his career. If he goes to a contender, be it the Giants or Red Sox or anybody else, now he's got a chance to shine with the spotlight on which he's done well in the past. So my guess is, or my question is to you, in the buy, sell, or keep, if you have him, considering that he might go to a contender, are you keeping him or selling him? And if you don't have him, are you trying to buy him now before he gets traded?
Well, in terms of that question, I guess partly it depends on format. So if you're in an NL-only format and your concern is he could go to the American League, which would give him the opportunity to DH, similar to what he did in yesterday's All-Star game, then you have to consider the likelihood of him getting moved to maybe a place like Boston. If you're in a league whereby you would hold him if you went to another league or a mixed league, it's a clear hold if you own him or an attempt to get him if you don't own him. Again, there is still the possibility he will be here in New York and will stay here in New York. And even if that happens, with the expectation that David Wright, who's starting a rehab assignment this week, and maybe Ike Davis, who started to do a little running, if both of them come back, you would assume that would have a positive effect on the lineup, which would enable him to even drive in more runs and or score more runs, as opposed to what's going on now, given the pieces that have been around him because of the lineup turnover. And even though the guys like Turner and Murphy have done well, they're not the same as obviously having guys like Davis and Wright if they're on the top of their game. So in terms of, I think it depends on format. The only way I would get rid of him is if you're an NL only and you're really concerned he's going to end up with an American League team, which will basically cause you to lose him. If you don't own him, I don't think his value takes a hit downward. I think if anything, there's an upswing in his value. He's shown in 2004 what happened in Houston when he went there, given the playoff run, which in essence got him the 7-year, $119 million contract. And personally, in my opinion, he's had a great year, and I wouldn't consider overpaying him. And because Boris is his client, this is likely not going to happen, but I would have considered a 2-year deal for him to stay in New York, only because of the fact they don't have a lot of other options in the outfield right now to be right fielders of the future. Fernando Martinez hasn't panned out. Kirk Neuenhuis is really not a right fielder, maybe more of a center fielder, and they may move Pagan, but he's going to need some more seasoning down in the minors because he's dealing with a back issue and may not be back the remainder of this year. So, I mean, in terms of keeping him in New York, yeah, the New York fans have been all over him, especially in 2005, his first bad year, but in 2006 and 2007, he carried this team. And I look at this deal similar to you looked at when you got Pedro. You didn't expect him to have 7 great years. You're hoping for 5 good ones and a couple of middling ones. And I would have to say that in terms of what he's brought here to the Mets and the value he's given from a fantasy perspective, he's probably met exactly what the expectations were.